I never could have imagined that the gift for my 68th birthday would almost cost me my life, uncovering the deepest betrayal a mother could face. The bottle of whiskey my daughter sent me after 3 years of silence contained a deadly poison, carefully designed to stop my heart. But fate had other plans when I decided to give that bottle to my son-in-law, unaware that it would trigger a quiet manhunt that would turn our quiet town into a battlefield. But before we go on, please subscribe to the Storyteller's Corner channel and write in the comments where you're watching this video from. We love to know how far our stories travel. The package arrived one October morning, wrapped in brown paper with just 2 words on the card: best wishes.
No signature, no return address.
But I instantly recognized the handwriting of Avery, the daughter I had raised for 20 years and hadn't seen in 3. I placed the package on the kitchen table, where the morning light streamed through the blinds, casting golden stripes that danced across the room. As I opened the package, I found a limited edition bottle of whiskey, one of those so beautiful you'd keep it as a decoration.
The amber liquid kaugt the lightest if it held fire within.
The dark green label with gold lettering suggested a design that cost more than the contents themselves. I ran my thumb over the wax seal on the cork, feeling its texture beneath the ridges of my skin. There was a time when whiskey was my favorite companion at the end of the day. Not carelessly, but slowly and deliberately. A single glass after a day spent mending fences or cleaning gutters. When Natalie was still alive, she'd pour us a glass after dinner.
On Sundays, wetzet on the porch, letting the chirping of crickets fill the silence.
That was before a heart attack took that possibility away from me, 3 years without a single drop, and Avery knew that. She was in the hospital then, when the doctor explained everything to me, the long list of things I couldn't have if I wanted to see 70. She didn't say much at the time, just stared at her phone, thumbing away. I told myself she was just trying to distract herself. Now, I'm not so sure. We didn't have a fight like in some movie, where someone slams a door and leaves. It was something more subtle. She just stopped coming to Sunday dinners, then she missed Thanksgiving. By the second Christmas without her, I realized we weren't speaking at all. Silence has a way of becoming a habit. Seeing her handwriting again after so long tightened my chest. It wasn't joy, not even relief, just a weight I couldn't name. The simple white card with just best wishes in blue ink. No mom, no signature, just those 2 lonely words, as if they were afraid to say more. I decided not to open the bottle, didn't even think about it. I pushed it to the other side of the table and turned back to my coffee, which was already cold. The clock above the stove ticked incessantly, making the house seem even emptier. I thought of Logan, my son-in-law. Logan is one of those men who never arrives empty-handed or without tools in the back of his truck. 2 summers ago, after a storm that ripped off half my roof shingles, he was up on a ladder with a hammer in hand by 7 a.m., before I'd even had my first sip of coffee. He's the kind of person who doesn't wait for an invitation to help. If anyone deserved something good, it was him. Since I couldn't drink the whiskey, the thought of it gathering dust on my shelf seemed wrong. Logan would open it, share it with friends, have a story to tell. That seemed better than seeing it fade behind glass. That afternoon, the bottle was secured on the passenger seat of my old sedan. I don't know why I did it, perhaps out of habit, but the idea of it falling during the drive bothered me. The sun was setting in the west, bathing everything in that amber light we only get in late October. The fields along the country highway were starting to turn brown from the harvested wheat. The air smelled faintly of wood smoke from a distant bonfire. Logan's house sat on a rise at the edge of town, a white building with a porch straight out of a postcard. I parked the car, the gravel crunching under the tires, and switched off the engine. He opened the door before I could knock, wearing a red flannel shirt and faded jeans, sawdust still clinging to his boots. "Madison, what's this?" he asked, looking directly at the bottle in my hands. "From Avery," I replied, handing it to him. His eyebrows rose in surprise. "Avery sent you this?" "Yes, I thought you'd appreciate it more than I would." He took the bottle carefully, turning it over to read the label. "This is special, Madison, the kind of bottle you save for a special occasion," I said. "So, make tonight special." He smiled. "I think I will. Thank you." It felt good to give it to him. To see it go to a place where it would be valued. I returned to my car, the evening light reflecting off the dashboard. On the drive home, I kept thinking about the bottle. Not with regret, but with curiosity. Avery never spent that much money without a reason. Most times, when she was younger, she'd borrow money for gas and forget to pay it back. So why now? Why a gift she knew I couldn't use? The thought gnawed at me as I pulled into the garage. I pushed it aside. Not everything needs a reason, I told myself, but I didn't believe it. That evening, I made a stew, and the house filled with the scent of onions and carrots. The kind of food best shared, though I ate it alone. The wall clock neared 9. I was just washing the last plate when the phone rang. The landline. Hardly anyone calls that number anymore. Hello, Mom. Avery's voice was soft and casual, as if no time had passed. I leaned against the counter in surprise. Avery. Happy birthday, she said, with a delay too great to sound natural. Did you get my gift? I did. Well, what did you think of it? It's a nice bottle. Have you tried it? Her tone changed only slightly, sharpness at the edges. No, I gave it to Logan. I thought he'd get more enjoyment out of it. Silence. No static, no crackle, just a long, heavy pause. You gave it to Logan? Her voice went cold. That's right. There was a sound like a slow, measured exhale. Then the line went dead. I stared at the phone for a moment before hanging up. The clock ticked on. My stomach churned, not from the stew, but from something less tangible. The way she'd asked about the whiskey, as if it mattered to her in a way it shouldn't. I turned off the kitchen light and went to bed, but sleep was slow to come. When I finally drifted off, it was a light, troubled sleep. The next morning, I tried to shake off that strange feeling. I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee and sat down with the newspaper. But in the middle of the day, the phone rang again. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but the area code was local. Mrs. Wagner? A woman's voice asked when I answered. Yes, this is Madison Wagner.
This is Natalie, Logan's wife.
I thought you should know Logan's in the hospital. He collapsed this morning. The doctors think it might be some kind of poisoning. The coffee in my hand went instantly cold. Poisoning. He was fine last night. We had a drink with dinner, and this morning he could barely stand. The doctors are running tests. I said nothing. My eyes drifted to the counter, to the empty space where the whiskey had sat less than 24 hours earlier. Did you notice anything unusual? She asked. My mouth was dry. No, but I gave him a bottle yesterday. Whiskey, from Avery. There was a pause. In the background, I heard hospital sounds, beeping monitors, and a squeaking cart in the hallway. I'll tell the doctors that, she finally said. If you think of anything else, anything at all, please call me. I promised to call and hung up.
I stood in the kitchen, the house silent around me.
The October light had turned pale and flat. I didn't move for a long while. When I finally did, I went to the trash can. Something white caught my eye at the bottom. A small plastic vial, like for vitamins, no label, just a light dust clinging inside. I didn't remember throwing it away. I picked it out. The cap was screwed on tight. I went to the refrigerator. On the middle shelf was a glass container with about half a cup of whiskey, the remainder after I'd poured Logan a little before giving him the bottle. I hadn't even thought to save it until that moment. My hands trembled as I took it out and placed it next to the vial on the counter. I thought of Owen, an old friend who had served with me years ago and now ran a small veterinary lab on the outskirts of town. He owed me a favor after I'd pulled his delivery truck out of a ditch a few winters back. I called him. Owen, I need you to test something for me, I said calmly. What? Whiskey? And maybe something else. He asked no further questions, just told me to meet him after the lab closed. That evening, I drove there, the glass container in a paper bag on the seat beside me. Owen met me in the parking lot, a lab coat over a hoodie. The faint smell of disinfectant hung in the air. This is something I'm going to regret, isn't it? He asked. Just tell me what's in it, I replied. He nodded, took the bag, and disappeared inside. I sat in the car, engine running, and watched the light drain from the sky. The radio was off. My thoughts drifted back to the last 24 hours. I replayed every step, the handwriting, the bottle, Avery's voice when I told her I'd given it to Logan, that long heavy pause. Owen called the next day, just after noon. "Madison, you're not going to like this. There's something in the whiskey. Foxglove. In the right dose, it will stop a man's heart." I closed my eyes. The phone was heavy in my hand. "You said Logan drank that?" "Yes." "And you didn't?" "No." He let out a slow sigh. "Then you just might have dodged a bullet." And here ends the first part of this story. Not with answers, but with a question that would lead me to places I never thought I'd have to go. Because the moment I hung up, I knew Avery had sent me more than just a gift. She'd sent me a message. I always thought there was no worse sound than the phone ringing in the middle of the night. It turns out, there is one. It's the phone ringing when, deep down, you already know the news will be terrible. When Owen hung up, the world around me fell silent, as if the house held its breath. I wasted no time. I grabbed my coat from the back of the chair, my car keys from the hook by the door, and drove to St. Jude Medical Center. The drive into town took me through empty traffic lights and intersections, one of those autumn mornings where the sun shines brightly but doesn't warm. I parked in the farthest corner of the lot and walked quickly, one hand in my pocket, the other pressed against my ribs, as if I could hold back what raged inside me. All hospitals have the same smell, something sterile mixed with burnt coffee, and the light is always too white. A volunteer pointed me towards Logan's room. He didn't look like the strong man who had climbed onto my roof uninvited. He was pale, his skin a shade lighter than the pillow beneath his head. The monitors beside the bed hummed and blinked to the rhythm of a persistent, slow heartbeat. Natalie sat in a plastic chair, as close to the bed as possible. She had that look I'd seen hundreds of times, that of someone waiting for something that refuses to be rushed. "Madison," she said, standing up. "Thank you for coming. How is he?" "They're trying to stabilize his heart rhythm." Her hands were clasped across her chest. Not in prayer, but as if she were trying to prevent air from escaping. "They said they found signs of a plant-based poison. They're running more tests." I stepped to the bedside. Logan's mouth was slightly open. Air moved in and out in a fragile rhythm. His hair, always neatly combed, had fallen across his forehead in a way that made him look younger and more vulnerable. "Did he eat anything unusual last night?" I asked. "Or drink anything he normally doesn't?" "We both had a drink with dinner." She looked directly at me. The question was already in the air. "The bottle you brought." "I want you to tell the doctors exactly that," I said intently. "Tell them it was new, unopened, and that I can get them a sample of the same liquid." She reached out as if to take my hand, then changed her mind and gripped the bed railing. "Madison, what is this?" "I don't know what to believe," I replied, which was only half the truth. "But I will find out." The doctor came in, a man in his 50s, with a face trained not to show emotion. He spoke in calm tones about heart rhythms, enzymes, and continuous observation. He didn't say what he didn't know, and he didn't know much yet. When he left, I promised Natalie I'd call as soon as I had anything that could help. In the car, I didn't start the engine immediately. I sat there, key half-turned, and looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked like a woman with nothing left to break that wasn't already cracked. "Foxglove," I said aloud, tasting the words in the air. Like a carpenter checking a warped board. They sounded cruel. They sounded deliberate. At home, the silence greeted me like a neighbor who has nothing to say. I went straight to the refrigerator. The glass container with the leftover whiskey was still there, hidden behind the milk. I held it up to the light, watching the liquid curve against the glass as I tilted it. You wouldn't know it just by looking. You never do. The worst things always come disguised as something harmless. I placed the container next to the sink and went to the trash can. I had thrown away that small white vial yesterday. I lifted the lid and noticed the bag had been moved, placed back differently, and the vial was gone. I looked at the door. The lock was as I'd left it the night before. The windows were down and closed. I didn't keep spare keys anywhere obvious. Still, someone had been here. You could feel it. How do you know when a room has been rearranged, even if you can't identify what's changed? I took a deep breath through my nose and exhaled slowly. No panic. Panic is loud and stupid. I needed something calm and useful. I called Owen again. It's gone, I said when he answered. What? The little vial I told you about. Someone took it from my trash. It wasn't me.
I know what my own hands did in my own house.
He didn't tell me I could be wrong. Owen understands the price you pay when you ignore what intuition already knows. You have to call the police, he said. I can document what's in the whiskey, but that vial would have been clear evidence of tampering. I know, I replied. I'll do it. And Madison? Yes. Don't let whoever did this think you're unprepared. I'm not, I affirmed, ending the call. I brewed coffee I didn't drink and sat at the table with a notepad. I tucked it into the inside pocket of my coat, right where its weight felt like a hand on my chest, reminding me to breathe. It was already afternoon when I pulled up to Avery's apartment complex. Her building was one in a row of others, almost identical. Neutral siding, brass numbers, and automatic porch lights. Her car was in the driveway clean, a decade newer than mine.
I valket up the pass and knocket.
She opened the door with a face that shifted quickly. Surprise. Then calculation, then an expression that tried to seem inviting. Mom, she said, as if she'd been expecting me, but also as if she had no idea what I could want.
This is unexpected.
Is it? I asked, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. The place smelled of lemon and nothing else. She kept it immaculate. With her, everything was always at right angles, nothing out of place. I heard about Logan, she commented, closing the door. Disturbing. His wife is with him now. The doctors think it might be a virus. That's what they believe. I kept my tone neutral.
If I presset her, she'd shoot down.
If I showed softness, she'd use it against me.
I valket into the kitchen.
On the counter were 3 bottles, 2 whiskey and 1 rye. Lined up like soldiers. None of them were the brand I'd received, none opened. Did you try the bottle you sent me? I asked. She gave a low laugh. The idea was for you to enjoy yourself, you know, for your birthday. You know I don't drink anymore. People change, she said with a careless shrug. I stepped closer to the counter and ran my finger along the rim of an empty glass next to the sink, to buy time. Logan tasted it, I remarked. He said his favorite glass was the one on the middle shelf, the single malt. She blinked once, slower than a natural reflex.
Yes, how strange, I said, feeling the recorder in my pocket like a second heartbeat.
I never told you where I kept it. For a fraction of a second, she froze, like an animal hearing a branch break in the woods. Then her mouth twisted into a practiced smile, and she shook her head with a practiced laugh. You must have mentioned it. You get talkative when you're sentimental. I did not, I asserted, holding her gaze until she had to choose to look away or confront me. She chose a third option, picked up a dish towel, and began to dry a glass that was already dry. Mom, she said, looking at the glass instead of me.
You always overthink things.
You always find something that needs fixing, even when no one asked. You sent me a $500 bottle I can't drink, I retorted. I'm trying to understand that. She placed the glass on the counter and opened her hands like someone with nothing to hide. Then perhaps there's nothing to understand. Perhaps, for once, you could give me the benefit of the doubt. Her voice might have sounded reasonable if you hadn't known her for over 30 years. My daughter has a way of sounding sincere when she lies. That pause from the call the previous night hung between us like a third person in the room. I'm going to ask you a question, I said, and I'm going to let the silence after it give me the answer. She looked at me as if we were playing chess and I'd just announced my next move. All right. Did you tamper with that whiskey?
Silence.
Silence is a living thing when used correctly. The refrigerator hummed. The clock on the microwave changed from 12:09 to 12:10. A car drove slowly by outside, tires audible on the asphalt. She didn't look away, nor did she speak. "Goodbye, Avery," I said, "because sometimes leaving is the only statement that matters." She spoke my name as I turned. "Mom." In that tone where the word is both a hook and a warning. I stopped but didn't turn around.
"You'll keep blaming me."
"You'll push me away," she said. "I'm not blaming," I replied, looking at the door. "I'm collecting." Outside, the air was sharp and metallic. I got in the car and turned off the voice recorder. The red light blinked and died.
I placet it on the Seat beside me like a silent witness.
My hands were calm, but my mind was agitated. I didn't drive home, not yet. I parked in the farthest corner of a supermarket parking lot, where no one would bother me, and I made a call I had avoided since Owen first mentioned Foxglove. "Detective Vincent," a deep voice answered after 2 rings. "Detective, my name is Madison Wagner. I believe I have information regarding a poisoning. I have a sample of the substance and a recording that might interest you." He didn't ask for explanations over the phone. Men who know their job don't demand the whole truth in the first breath. "Can you come in this afternoon?" he asked. "Yes, I can." He gave me a time and an office number in the back hallway of the police precinct. When I hung up, my hands remained on the steering wheel. I stared straight ahead. The automatic doors of the supermarket opened and closed repeatedly. People went in and out, carrying paper bags filled with groceries that would make their homes smell of dinner. Back at home, I stopped at the mailbox, because sometimes you have to do something mundane to prevent the other things from completely consuming you. Flyers, a bill, a supermarket advertisement, and a postcard from a car dealership that thought it could convince me with 0% interest. Inside, I put the glass container in a plastic bag, sealed it as if I knew what I was doing, and placed it in an old cigar box where I used to keep nails. The voice recorder went into the same box. I put the box in a paper bag with handles, and for good measure, put that bag into another. After seeing something disappear from your trash, extra layers feel more like caution than paranoia. I called Natalie. She answered quickly, her voice small and tired. "Madison, I'm going to the police," I informed her. "I have a sample and other evidence." "Logan is slipping in and out of consciousness," she said. "They have him hooked up to a heart monitor. He keeps waking up and asking what day it is. I tell him, and he nods as if trying to decide if he believes me. "I'll call you after I've spoken with the detective," I promised. "Tell him I'll stop by later, if he wants to see a familiar face." She laughed, a single breathless sound. "He likes that, when you ask him to be strong," she said. "But he likes your company more." I checked everything. I locked all the doors and double-checked the windows before I left. The paper bag sat on the passenger seat like a person. I buckled it in with the seatbelt, a habit of comfort when common sense seemed far away. On the way to the precinct, I turned on the radio without really listening. People sang about things that seemed simple, which at first irritated me, then made me tired, and finally evoked nothing at all within me. The police precinct was somehow colder than the hospital, but it smelled better. Vincent met me in a small office with a window that looked out onto a brick wall. He was younger than me, but older than a rookie, with sharp eyes and a tie he'd tightened several times over the course of the day. He offered me water. I accepted it, because my mouth was dry and because people notice when you refuse everything they offer. He waited until I'd taken a sip before asking his first question. "Tell me about the whiskey." And so I did. I gave him the details, Avery's exact words, and the significance of that pause that didn't sound like surprise. I didn't share my theories, only the facts, letting him arrange them as he saw fit. Then I placed the paper bag on the table, took out the box, opened it, and laid the glass container and the voice recorder on his desk like tools at the start of a job. He didn't touch the items yet. He asked questions that seemed small but weren't. "Who else has keys to your house? When was the last time you went through your trash? Did you mention the vial to anyone else besides Owen?" Then he picked up the voice recorder and weighed it in his hand, as if assessing the weight a word can carry when you have to bear it. "Do you understand, Mrs. Wagner?" he said. "This doesn't become a case because you and I have a hunch. This becomes a case when what you've handed me can withstand official scrutiny. I understand, I replied. I want other people to see it. He nodded. We'll send the liquid to the State Bureau of Investigation. We'll make a copy of your recording. If there's cause, we'll act. If not, we'll tell you exactly why we can't. Are you all right with that? I am, I said, and I meant it. I don't want the wrong person punished. I want the right truth to come to light. As I stood to leave, he spoke my name as if tasting it. Mrs. Wagner. Yes. Do not speak to your daughter again until I tell you to. If she contacts you, note the time and what she says, and keep your responses shorter than her questions. I nodded, surprised by the feeling that someone else was finally willing to bear a corner of the weight I was carrying. Outside, the afternoon had turned gray and murky, the kind of light that hurts the eyes more than it illuminates the path. I drove to the hospital. Natalie sat in the same chair, and the same monitors continued their electronic, silent song. Logan looked more like himself. His skin had regained some color, and his mouth was less strained around the breath that came and went. I placed my hand on the bed rail, and his eyes opened. You look like hell, he whispered. You should see yourself, I replied, and he smiled with only the left side of his mouth. The way men do when a smile demands too much of the rest of the face. I hear you're making friends with the police, he remarked. I'm trying to make sure they're on our side when they show up, I replied. He closed his eyes again, nodded once, and drifted off. I stayed there longer than necessary, listening to the machine that kept him honest with his heartbeat. Natalie whispered words that belonged only to them. At home, everything was exactly as I had left it. The silence filled the rooms like a guest who refuses to leave. I made an omelette that I didn't finish and washed the pan, because some things you do just to prove to yourself that you're still the person who does them. I went to the hallway closet, took the fireproof box from the top shelf, and opened it on the kitchen table. Inside, I kept the documents of a life. Birth certificates, the deed to the house, and Natalie's rose gold wedding ring, which I still wasn't ready to let go of. I added a sticky note to the inside. Whiskey sample with police. Do not discard. I don't know who the note was for, maybe myself. I slept on the sofa with the whole light on. I hadn't done that since the night after my heart attack, and my chest did not enjoy the similarity between those two moments. I woke before dawn, because the body remembers old alarms. I brewed coffee and didn't drink it. I listened to the house breathe. When the sun finally rose, I called Natalie and informed her I'd stop by around noon. She said the doctor believed Logan would be moved from intensive care to a transitional unit if his vitals remained stable. At 10 a.m., the phone rang, unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, because I had learned something important the day before. You don't owe anyone an answer until you're ready to give it. The message came after the second ring. I waited, then pressed play. Mom, it's me. Avery's voice was taut like a wire. We need to talk. The sooner, the better. She paused. Call me back. I didn't call back. I noted the time and the exact words and placed the slip of paper in the fireproof box, because sometimes you have to create your own evidence. I looked out the window at my garden, which refused to stay green, no matter how much a woman watered it. The porch swing creaked once. No wind I could see. The day settled back into silence. If you want me to admit I was scared, I won't deny it. Fear isn't something I hide anymore. It's part of the truth, like nails to wood. It holds everything together. I stood there in the kitchen, hand on the back of a chair, knowing what came next without having to write it down. Whatever this was, it had passed the point where a mother and daughter could resolve it with a quiet conversation at the table. It had passed the point where a bottle was just a gift, and a hospital was just a place that happened to other people. It would get worse before it got better, and I would continue to walk toward it. One room, one call, one steady breath at a time. There's a kind of silence that doesn't stay still. It wanders, taps at the rim of your coffee cup. It stares at the phone on the counter, counting to 60 with you. Then it starts over. Detective Vincent told me not to speak to my daughter, so I didn't call Avery back. I noted the time of the voicemail, as if it were a license plate I had to remember. In the morning, I followed the detective's instructions precisely, but the house felt watched. I left the phone on the hall table and walked through the rooms with my hands clasped behind my back. Not because I expected to find anything, but because women like me don't sit when they can stand, don't rest when there's work to be done. The October light was fainter today, like a white cloth draped over the sun. I checked the back door, the window locks, the side entrance to the garage with the stubborn lock that you have to lift while turning. All secure, all normal. Normal isn't the same as safe. I made a second cup of coffee, didn't drink it, and opened the fireproof box on the kitchen table. Inside were the deed, the insurance forms, Natalie's ring, the index card where I'd copied Avery's exact message. I added another card. Detective Vincent 1430, underlined twice. All morning I refrained from calling the precinct. Not out of hesitation, but because I wanted to appear with a day's worth of accumulated resolve within me. Before I left, I took one last slow walk through the house. In the front hallway, I stopped. The deadbolt on the door aligned with the metal plate, just a fraction of a millimeter off. A new scratch on the edge of the metal, round and clear, like a poorly cut key would make after a few tries. Nothing broken, nothing forced open, just a mark you only notice if you know the door like the bones of your own hand. A thought settled in my chest and didn't move. Someone had been inside. I went to the cutlery drawer and found a small piece of thread and clear tape. I placed the thread at the bottom of the door frame and taped it down. A trick I'd learned from a soldier who was tired of finding his locker rummaged through. You don't catch an intruder. You create a story about whether they were there. As I got into the car, the house looked empty and harmless, exactly as a house should. Still, I backed out as if leaving a sleeping animal. The police precinct was 3 turns and a long straight away from the hospital. I carried the weight of Logan's illness in my bones as I walked down the hall to Vincent's office. He occupied an unassuming room, small window, large table, piles of files that seemed to grow in the dark. He stood to shake my hand and gestured to a chair. He didn't look like a man who hadn't slept much, nor like a man who had slept too much. He looked like a man who knew what to do with hard facts. "Thank you for coming in, Mrs. Wagner," he said. "And for the samples from yesterday. We've sent them to the State Bureau of Investigation. Your friend Owen's preliminary results match what we've seen. We're taking this seriously." "I assume seriousness has levels," I remarked. He almost reddened. "It does. Right now, it means we're looking for confirmation. The hospital reports, your recording, the chain of custody for the sample." He pushed a notepad towards me. "I want your timeline in your own words. When did you receive the package? When did you give it to Mr. Wagner? When did your daughter call you? When did you notice the vial was missing?" I told him everything directly, watching his pen move. He didn't interrupt, except to confirm a time or a date. When I finished, he tapped the side of his pen on the pad and leaned back. "You said the trash bag was moved. Any signs of forced entry?" "No." "Anyone else with keys?" "Nos perquis hidden." "No one I've recently given one to. My late wife had hers. My daughter had one when she was younger." "When was the last time you saw her with that key?" The answer wanted to be ages ago, but the truth came dressed in a hospital gown. 5 years ago, after the heart attack, when Avery came to pick up some things for me before I was discharged. She brought slippers, sweatpants, and my charger. At the time, I thanked her for the kindness of thinking of the charger. I didn't ask for the keys back. I assume she left them on the kitchen counter. "After my heart attack," I said slowly, "she had them. I don't recall her giving them back to me." Vincent nodded, neither surprised nor satisfied. "If someone entered without force, that helps explain the missing vial. Did anyone else know about it?" "Only Owen." "I'll ask you to document the conversation you had, just to show we're not creating evidence after the fact." He closed the pad. "Mrs. Wagner, I'm telling you clearly, do not meet with your daughter.
If she invites you à nuvere, let me know.
If she shows up, call 911. I'm serious." I thought of Avery's voice on my voicemail, taut like a cable under the hood of a car you shouldn't touch while the engine is hot. "I will do exactly what you say," I replied. He slid a card across the table. "My cell number. If you feel something isn't right, call.
ID rata bivrongt visitan right ens toilette.
Thank you, I said, standing up. As I left, the building smelled of copier toner and floor wax. I walked down 2 flights of stairs and paused on the landing to breathe. I wasn't out of breath. I was checking if the ground beneath me was still the same I'd walked on when I entered. Natalie called as I parked at the hospital. I answered immediately. Madison, he's better, she said, tears in her voice. They're moving him from ICU to a step-down unit. He apologizes every time he wakes up, as if he thinks he's ruined someone's party. It'll be a party when he's home, I replied. May I come in?
Please Donnerstag.
Logan looked pale but solid, now sitting upright with clearer eyes. He extended his forearm to me as I entered, that old handshake of working men, where you grip each other's wrists. You look worse today, he said, which made Natalie laugh through the tissue she held to her chin. I brought my worst look for a visit, I replied, pulling up a chair.
Tomorrow, I'll bring my best.
Natalie excused herself to speak with a nurse. As the curtain closed, Logan lowered his voice.
Madison, between you and me.
He glanced at the door, then back. Do you think Avery did this? I think that bottle wasn't a gift. He studied my face as if learning a language from it. Are you going to handle this? I'll follow the law, I replied. I'll be steadfast. That wasn't my question. I let the question hang long enough to show I'd heard it.
Il handle this.
He squeezed my forearm once, then let go. Women like us don't hug unless we're burying someone. The handshake is permission to feel without formality. The curtain opened, and Natalie returned with a younger woman by her side, around 30, hair tied back in a practical ponytail, eyes tired but alert. I recognized her from the photos on the mantelpiece at Avery's house. Olivia, Avery's partner, whom I'd spoken to only twice since they became partners, polite like distant neighbors. Madison, she said, I'm glad you're here. I stood up. How are you managing? She looked at Logan, scared, angry, mostly scared. Her voice dropped. We need to talk. Natalie stroked Logan's hand and said, I'll leave you two alone for a moment, and went into the hallway. A woman who understood when a conversation needed privacy, even if she wasn't the one who had asked for it.
Olivia gestured ML into the small family room around the corner.
There was a coffee machine that made everything taste like plastic and 2 chairs with backs too straight to be comfortable. She didn't sit. Neither did I. I don't know what you know, she began. But I know Avery has been different for a long time.
Distant, secretive.
She keeps bottles on a shelf in the garage, dried plants. She says it's for a hobby. She's been deep into online groups about herbal extraction. I swallowed. I didn't think it would be related to something like this. Foxglove, I said. Have you heard that name? Her eyes showed recognition or fear, or both. Yes, I saw it in her search history. I thought she was just reading up.
Detective Vincent will want to speak with you when you're ready.
She nodded quickly. I've already called him. I left him a message. Good, I said. A heat rose in my chest.
Not the old kind.
It was the kind that distinguishes between a threat and a warning. Olivia, if you have anything, screenshots, messages, photos of those bottles, keep them. Let the detective follow that lead. She looked at me intently enough to truly see me. Why would she do this to them? I could have said many things. Money I hadn't given her, love I hadn't shown her in the way she wanted, disappointments that led to resentment. Instead, I spoke the truth as I knew it, because if you can't control the narrative, you'd rather burn the page. She flinched as if the words were a cold draft. She asked me this morning if I'd heard from you. She said she wanted to know if they, liked the bottle. What did you tell her? That you gave it to my father. We stood in silence for a few seconds, with that sentence between us, the kind of thing that changes shape the longer you look at it. Thank you, I said, for telling me. I'm sorry, she replied, and I knew she meant everything, not just the part she'd verbalized. We returned to Logan's room and talked about lighter topics. The weather, football, the cafeteria soup they tried to call chicken noodle. I left when the nurse came to check the monitors, promising to bring magazines, as if that would matter to the outcome. On the way home, I stopped at the hardware store. I bought 2 new deadbolts and a pack of those small adhesive alarms that go off when a door is opened. The clerk remarked that winter was coming early. I replied something about having to be prepared. He bagged the locks and wished me a good day. We say such things to each other. Have a good day, as if the day were listening. At home, the thread I'd taped to the door was exactly where I'd left it, undisturbed. I stepped over it, closing the door with a soft click behind me. I had thought of calling a locksmith, but installing the locks myself felt like making my own bed in an unfamiliar hotel room. If I did it, maybe I could lay my head down without all the mental noise. I installed the first lock on the back door, then the second on the front door, screwing the plates in slowly and tightly, my forearms muscles familiar with the angle and pressure. The small alarms were stuck to the frames with a sound reminiscent of pulling off a bandage. I activated them and opened the door to hear the shrill alarm, confirming they would work. And they did well. When I finished, the sun had sunk low enough to cast long shadows across the floor. I heated a can of soup and ate it standing, holding the bowl in my left hand and the spoon in my right. Old habits, less dishes to wash that way. The phone vibrated on the hall table. I didn't startle. I walked toward it with the measured pace of a woman who will open the door without haste. Again, an unknown number. I let it vibrate. It stopped. Seconds later, a text message appeared. Avery, we need to talk face-to-face today. A second message followed before I could process the first. Avery, don't make it worse than it already is. I placed the phone on the table as if it could burn me. I noted the time and the messages exactly as they arrived on a piece of paper, and added it to the fireproof box. Then I retrieved Detective Vincent's card from my wallet and dialed. He answered quickly. Vincent. This is Wagner, I said. She's asking for a meeting. No, he replied, the words as definitive as a slamming gate. Forward the texts to me. I'll log them. If she calls, let it go to voicemail. She already left a message. I've transcribed it. Good, keep doing that. Detective, could you come by and examine my front door? I think someone used a key that wasn't mine. I can send an officer to photograph and document it, he said. I'll come personally if I'm free in the next hour. He arrived 20 minutes later with a young officer named Mason. They photographed the metal plate, the small scratch where the key had scraped, the thread stuck to the bottom like an improvised trap. Vincent showed no surprise. He didn't seem like a man who enjoyed being right, but he also didn't waste energy feigning surprise when he wasn't. Do you have the original set of keys? He asked. I went to the hall closet and retrieved the small tin where we'd kept the spare keys 20 years ago. Inside were 2 brass keys marked front and back in Natalie's neat handwriting. A spare key, and a key that shouldn't have been there. An unmarked copy, cut slightly off-center, causing it to fit awkwardly in the tin. My stomach froze. That's not ours, I asserted. We never labeled it. We labeled everything. Vincent asked Mason to put it in an evidence bag. We'll see if we can get fingerprints. No promises. Keys aren't very good for prints. Do what you can, I pleaded. I wished every small element in this story would stop pretending not to be connected to the rest. As they left, the house felt different. Not safer, not less guarded, just witnessed. Something happens when the official world invades your private space. The ground tilts, then reorients at a new angle. I sat at the kitchen table, holding my coffee cup with both hands, though it was empty. The porch swing creaked. No visible wind. I waited for footsteps that didn't come. I put the phone on Do Not Disturb, and turned it face down. As a child, I thought being an adult meant no one could tell me what to do. Now, it means I've learned who to listen to. Around 9 p.m., a car lingered long enough outside that I got up and went to the window. Headlights illuminated the porch, then vanished. I stayed at the window until I heard the sound of the engine receding. It could be nothing, a lost teenager, a delivery driver checking an address. It seemed to be something that wanted to see if I would tremble. I didn't sleep. I lay on the sofa with the hall light on and my boots by the door. I'm too old for heroics. I'm not too old to be prepared. Shortly before sunrise, the phone vibrated again. Voicemail, no ring. I had forgotten about Do Not Disturb mode. I played the message at low volume. "Mom, you're making things complicated," Avery's voice said, more restrained than before, as if she were in a place where she didn't want to be heard. "You went to the police. That's not smart. We could have worked this out. You're not thinking clearly." She hung up. I noted everything. We could have worked this out. Telling words. Worked out what? At 7 a.m., Vincent called. "The State Bureau of Investigation has responded with preliminary results," he reported. "Independent confirmation of foxglove in your sample. That's enough to formally open a case and request Mr. Wagner's medical records. We're acting." I exhaled what had been held within me since Owen's first mention of foxglove. "Tell me what you need. Keep doing what you've been doing. Document, don't involve yourself. Lock your doors. I'll be in touch for a formal, recorded statement.
If your daughter contacts you, save everything.
If she shows up, call 911. I'm serious." "I know you are," I replied. "Detective." "Yes, thank you." He didn't say, "You're welcome." He said, "We'll do our job." Coming from a man like him, that was the same thing. I showered, got dressed, and put on a clean shirt. There's a way a woman needs to look when the day demands steadfastness. I made breakfast and ate it at the table, as if every bite were the right choice. I drove to the hospital with a stack of magazines under my arm. About home renovation, a luxurious, oversized garden that would never grow in the dry soil of our region. Logan was awake enough to feign interest in an article about chainsaw safety. We both knew he was doing me a favor. The pretense was a kindness. Olivia came in during an article about patio maintenance. She held her phone and looked like someone who hadn't slept in a bed, just near one. "Detective Vincent called me," she said. "He wants me to bring him Avery's old laptop. I still have it from before we moved in together." "Bring it to him," I said. "Let the law carry what it was made to carry." She nodded. "Madison, she sent me a message," she continued, looking down. "She asked if I was playing the hero. She said if anything happens, it's my fault." She looked up. I forwarded it to Vincent. "Good," I said. A heat rose in my chest. Not the old kind. It was the kind that distinguishes between a threat and a warning. Respond to nothing she sends. Not a word, not even to say you won't respond. As I left, the light outside had the raw honesty of midday. I drove the long way home. Not out of fear, but because I wanted to put more distance between myself and what would come next. The thread on the door was still intact. I stepped over it as if it were a boundary I could respect and closed the door behind me. I sat with a pen and a yellow pad writing, "What does she want?" in large letters that crossed the page. Below, I again made 2 columns. Money, control. Under money, I wrote, "Last winter, 20,000 refused." Under control, I wrote, "Bottle location.
Vial missing.
Calls, we need to talk." The control side weighed heavier on the scale. Money is a reason. Control is a habit. Habits last longer. Around noon, the door alarm shrieked. I was already out of my chair, phone in hand, before my brain could tell my body it had overreacted. The alarm shrieked again, doing its job. I stepped out of sight of the window and pulled the curtain open a finger's width. A delivery truck. The driver had opened the screen door to place a padded envelope on the doormat. He looked at the alarm, shrugged like a man who had heard worse sounds, and backed away. The door closed softly, the alarm silenced. I let my heart return to its place and waited. When the vehicle drove away, I opened the door. The envelope had no return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper, no note, just a printed photo. My porch last night, photographed from across the street. The porch swing unmoved, the light above the door illuminated, no one in the picture. The photo had been taken in the last 24 hours. I looked down the street, at the neighbors' fences, at the spot near the corner where a car could sit with its lights off and watch without being seen. Then I took the photo to the fireproof box, added it to the stack, and called Vincent. He answered immediately. I described what had arrived, how it arrived, what it showed. Don't discard it, he instructed. I'll send someone. You must be tired of hearing from me, I remarked. I prefer that to the alternative, he replied. He hung up quickly, turning our conversation into a task to be completed. I stood at the window, watching the street from the side, like observing a wild animal you don't want to startle. The porch swing moved once. No wind. Houses are like that. What seems static always communicates something if you're willing to see it. By late afternoon, the police had picked up the photo and taken my statement about how it arrived. They also took the envelope.
Vincent sent ML a message.
We're requesting surveillance camera footage from your street. Night came like a slowly closing door. I reheated last night's soup and ate it sitting on the back steps. The October air cut cleanly into my lungs. The backyard darkened, the swing remained unmoved, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barked at something only dogs can perceive. I went inside and turned on the hall light. The phone vibrated again. Avery, do you think they'll protect you from what you started? Call me. I didn't call her. I copied it word for word and slid the paper into the box. The box closed with that soft, final sound it always makes. I put it back on the highest shelf, like a woman placing a weight where she can't stumble over it in the dark. I stood still, listening to the house talking to itself. The creaks and sighs of the wood, the quiet hum of the refrigerator motor, the ticking of a clock that doesn't understand the meaning of time. I thought of the first time Avery said Mom in a way that made my heart want to stand up and salute, and the last time she said Mom in a way that made it flinch. It was already pitch dark. When I finally lay down on the sofa, I placed my hand on my chest and felt my heart working. Slow, steady, efficient. A long time ago, a doctor told me I'd know if I was in danger. That night, that seemed the most honest thing I possessed. I don't know if sleep came or if the night simply decided to have mercy, but when the phone rang at 6 a.m., I was ready. I answered on the first ring. Mrs. Wagner, Vincent, he said without greeting. Yes. The State Bureau of Investigation has confirmed. We're applying for an arrest warrant. I sat down, closing my eyes, imagining the porch swing, the white thread across the threshold, the photo of my own house from across the street. I saw a bottle that caught the morning light as if it were shame in a glass. Where do you need me? I asked. Right where you are, he replied. And no matter what happens, don't open the door. Unless the person on the other side can prove they're here to help. The line went silent, the house listened, and I remained in the small country I had built within my walls, waiting for the day to cross the threshold. They say the blow you don't expect is the one you remember. But this time, I expected it. I'd been expecting it since Vincent told me the lab confirmed the poison. Still, when the knocking came, loud and decisive, it tightened my chest. Not from fear, but from the knowledge that the line we'd been following in the dark was about to be drawn in bright, official ink. That knocking meant the order was now legally binding, and the day wouldn't wait for me to feel ready. It was just after 7 a.m. The light outside had that pale gold that barely touches the ground before fading. I opened the door to find Vincent with two uniformed officers, Mason from before and another I didn't recognize, young enough that his duty belt seemed too big for him. They were dressed for work that wouldn't just stay on paper. Good morning, Mrs. Wagner, Vincent said, holding a folded document in a clear plastic glove. The judge signed it at 7 a.m. We have authorization to search your daughter's residence and seize any items relevant to the case. He didn't have to explain. This was the moment everything could change. Do you need me there? I asked. No, he said. And that's not a request, that's an instruction. We don't want you in her line of sight today. We'll conduct the search. If we find what we expect, we'll proceed accordingly. Proceed accordingly is police speak for your life might not look the same by dinner. Mason looked into the inner hallway. Any changes overnight? The thread is still intact. No alarm went off. Vincent nodded briefly. Good, leave them activated. I'll make sure a proper camera system is installed before the end of the week. They drove off in a convoy, a black sedan, a police cruiser rolling down the street like punctuation mark heading towards an unfinished sentence. I stood at the door until they rounded the corner. Then I closed the door and looked at the thread at the bottom of the frame, still perfectly unmoved, as if daring someone to disturb it. The following hours stretched endlessly. I tried to read. The words sat on the page like strangers at a bus stop. I made coffee. I didn't drink it. Around 11 a.m., I took a slow walk to the edge of town, stopping at the small Veterans Memorial Park, where the benches overlooked a fountain that hadn't worked since last summer. The sound of traffic on the main road was distant enough to let the air settle. I was here once with Avery when she was 10. We'd brought bread for the ducks. She asked me what all the names on the plaques were for. I told her they were for men and women who had fulfilled their duty to the end. She asked if that meant they had completed the mission. I said yes. She didn't ask what the mission was. Sometimes I think that's the part one should have explained to her. By 1 p.m., I was back home, sitting at the kitchen table with the phone face up. I didn't expect her to call. Avery isn't the type to call when cornered. She's the type to show up unannounced and force the conversation on her own terms. That's what worried Vincent. At 1:17 p.m., the phone vibrated. Not a call, but a text from Olivia. Olivia, they're here. I'm in the bedroom with the door closed. I can hear them rummaging in the garage. I replied, stay inside.
Don't interfere.
You're safe with them. She didn't reply again. I imagined her sitting on the edge of the bed, hands clasped, listening to boots on concrete and the sound of boxes being moved. I knew that sound. It's the sound of someone searching for the truth, without caring if they wake up the whole house. At 2:40 p.m., Vincent called. We found it. I let the words sink in. What did you find? 3 glass bottles, labeled with tape. FH rootstock and tincture. 2 contain dried plant material consistent with foxglove. The 3rd contains liquid. We'll send it to the lab for confirmation. We also found handwritten notes on preparation methods, dosage estimations, and... He paused. An unsealed envelope addressed to you, containing a small note with your name at the top and the words you'll understand why when it's over at the bottom. Nothing in between, just a drawing of a tree with its roots circled. The kitchen felt colder. She left me a message, in case the bottle had worked. It looks that way, Vincent said, his voice calm. We'll log everything, catalog it, photograph it. Olivia is cooperating fully. She's agreed to the search of shared digital devices. Do you have her? I asked. Not yet. She wasn't home when we arrived. We're issuing a warrant for her arrest. I gripped the phone tighter. Detective, if she comes here. We've already flagged your address for priority response. Do not engage with her. The line went silent for a moment. Then he added, we're moving from suspicion to evidence, Mrs. Wagner. That changes everything. I understand. I hung up and went to the fireproof box. I added a note. 2:40 p.m. Vincent called, found bottles, notes, letter. I read the other index cards in the stack, one by one, as if consulting the instructions for a machine you can't disassemble. Each entry was part of the proof that the last month hadn't been a fever dream. Around 5 p.m., I called Natalie to update her. Logan was asleep. She listened without interrupting, just as she had when I called her from the emergency room years ago after my heart attack. Madison, she said when I finished. This will end one of 2 ways. Either she'll be arrested, or she'll run away. She won't run far, I replied. No, but far enough to make you doubt. At 6:30 p.m., the door alarm went off. I was in the hallway in 3 steps, phone in hand. The front door was closed, the thread in the frame untouched. The sound came from the back. I moved slowly, not out of fear, but because you don't rush when you need to see everything. Through the kitchen window, I saw the screen door swing once, twice, then stop. No one in sight. I stepped closer and saw a folded piece of paper wedged between the doorknob and the frame. I opened the door, deactivated the alarm, and picked up the paper, a single sentence in thick black ballpoint pen. Stop letting them in or I will.
No Signature, no Envelope, just Tose Words.
I took a photo, placed the paper in a plastic glove, and called Vincent. He said an officer was nearby and would be there in 15 minutes. Officer Mason arrived in 10. He photographed the note in my hand, the spot on the door, the hinges, and the backyard beyond. Did you see anyone? He asked. No movement on the street, I replied. Could have been dropped, and she left quickly. He didn't leave with the note, promising to log it immediately. That night, I didn't bother with the sofa. I placed a chair in the corner of the living room from which I could see both doors, front and back. The house had a faint metallic smell from the new locks. I left the lights on, not because I wanted to see outside, but because I wanted everyone outside to see me. At 9:45 p.m., my phone lit up, unknown number. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. A minute later, I played the message. Mom, it's me. They're making a mistake. The things they found aren't what you think. You know me better. A pause. Call me, please. The voice was calm, measured, almost gentle. The kind of tone you'd use to sell something to someone who doesn't want to buy. I didn't call back. I noted it word for word. The morning brought a hard frost. The grass was white at the tips, and the air tasted of metal. Vincent sent a message at 7 a.m. We apprehended her without incident. I'll keep you updated. I stared at the words until they stopped being shapes and became facts. I drove to the precinct just before noon. The waiting room was small, with 2 plastic chairs against one wall and a humming vending machine in the corner. Vincent came out to meet me. She's not talking, he said. Immediately requested an attorney. That's fine. We have enough to hold her. Olivia provided extensive digital evidence. Emails referring to route preparation and perfect timing. Search history regarding toxicity levels in adults over 60. What happens now? We'll present the charges to the district attorney's office. Attempted murder, possession of a controlled toxic substance. Evidence tampering. The process will move quickly. I nodded. My hands remained in my pockets so they wouldn't do anything inappropriate. Vincent watched me for a moment. You're holding up well. I'm standing upright, I replied. That's enough. As I left the precinct, the sky had taken on a monochrome gray, one of those that makes you think of snow, even if the forecast says otherwise. I drove aimlessly, past the old mill, the closed hardware store, the restaurant that still smelled of grease from 20 years ago. I ended up at the hospital. Logan was awake, watching a game show with the sound off. Natalie sat beside him, knitting something green. They have her, I said quietly. Logan nodded once. Good. Natalie's needles continued to move. And now? She asked. Now, I replied. We wait for the system to do its work. That evening, I sat on the back steps with a cup of tea. Steam rose into the cold air. The backyard was silent, save for the occasional creak of a branch in the wind. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked once, then fell silent. I thought of the note on the door, the bottles in the garage, the letter with the tree roots, and I thought of the little girl with the bread in the memorial park, asking if the names meant they had completed the mission. Perhaps that was my mission, not to end her, but to ensure she didn't end me. As I went inside, I checked the thread on the door, still there, still revealing the truth. Poison is an ugly word. It doesn't just stay in your mouth, it changes the way you breathe. Vincent didn't say it immediately. He let Owen explain first, perhaps knowing it would be less brutal to hear it from a friend than from a detective. But there's no gentle way to hear that something meant to kill you was already inside a man you respect, and that you were the one who gave it to him. The decision of what to do with Avery came like a door closing with a definitive click. I called Vincent. Tell the district attorney I'll testify. Full charges. He didn't say good choice, or you're doing the right thing. He just said, understood. And that was enough. 3 days later, the hearing was scheduled. Preliminary motions, evidence lists, witness preparation. Avery's attorney, Ms. Cardoso, objected to half of it, but the judge overruled most. When they first brought Avery into the courtroom, she scanned the room and found me. Her eyes showed no softness. On the contrary, they grew colder, as if she'd just rechecked her list. I held her gaze, because perhaps she had. They call it a courtroom, but to me, it looked like a minefield. Every word, every glance could explode in your face. I went in thinking the truth would stand for itself. Then I saw Avery's attorney smile at me as if she already knew where I would step and how hard I would fall. On the day of the evidentiary hearing, the benches were half filled, but the air felt heavier than in a crowded church in August. I sat behind Vincent and the prosecutor, my hands clasped in my lap, pretending they weren't sweating. Avery walked in wearing an orange jumpsuit, her wrists in handcuffs. She didn't look at me initially, then she glanced briefly, just long enough for the corners of her mouth to twitch. Not in a smile, but something colder. I remembered why I was there. Logan's hospital bed, the lab report, that damn notebook. The judge called us to order. Vincent took the stand. He was professional and direct, leading the court through how the bottle was received, tested, and confirmed to be poisoned.
MS.
Cardoso objected twice on grounds of chain of custody issues, but the judge overruled both. Then it was my turn. The bailiff swore me in. I sat with the microphone close enough to hear my own breath. The prosecutor began with simple questions: my name, age, where I lived, and my relationship to the defendant. Yes, Avery is my daughter, I replied, and it sounded strange, spoken aloud, as if it belonged to someone else's life. The prosecutor led me through the day of the gift. I spoke directly about the package, the handwriting, the decision to give it to Logan, how Logan ended up in the hospital, how Owen tested the bottle. I kept my tone even, as Vincent had advised me. Stick to the facts. Let the evidence speak. Then Ms. Cardoso stood. Mrs. Wagner, she began, her voice as smooth as polished wood. You claim to recognize my client's handwriting on the note. I don't claim I know. But you hadn't seen that handwriting in over 3 years. Correct. Correct. Is it possible then, Mrs. Wagner, that you're mistaken? No. She leaned on the railing with one hand. Are you telling this court that a woman's life should be ruined because you believe a note looks like your daughter's handwriting? I felt the first heat rise in my chest. I don't believe it. I know it. Ms. Cardoso casually stepped back. Interesting, because we have here, she held up a paper, a graphological analysis from a certified expert who states that the note could not have been written by Avery. Murmurs went through the room. The judge banged his gavel. The prosecutor objected, questioning the validity of the report. The judge allowed it for the record, but my stomach sank. Ms. Cardoso smiled slightly. And tell me, Mrs. Wagner, isn't it true that you and my client had a strained relationship for years, that you sold her mother's homestead without her consent? The prosecutor objected again. Irrelevant and inflammatory. Sustained, the judge said. But the damage was already done. The jurors had heard it. When I finished, I stepped down. My legs were heavier than before. Vincent met me at the table. They're trying to portray you as bitter and vindictive, he said quietly. That's all they have. Don't let it affect you. But I could feel that it already was. Outside, on the steps of the courthouse, Logan waited, leaning on his cane. They play dirty, he remarked. It doesn't matter if it's true. They just need enough to confuse the jury. I nodded. Now they have a graphological report.
Logans Mut twisted.
Bought. Probably. I've seen it in business disputes. You can buy an opinion like you can buy a necktie. On the day of jury deliberation, the sky was gray and heavy, as if weighing all our decisions. I sat in the gallery, my hands folded in my lap, staring at the back of Avery's neck. MS. Cardoso had done her job, sowing doubt, implying I was a vengeful mother fabricating accusations, but the prosecutor had been relentless with the evidence. The notebook with the initials MW next to lethal doses, the bottles found exactly where Olivia said they were, the search histories for foxglove and cardiac arrest in elderly individuals. When the jury returned, I took a deep breath. The foreman stood, looking not at Avery, but at the judge. On the charge of attempted murder in the first degree, we find the defendant. In that half-second before he finished speaking, I realized I had been holding my breath since the day that bottle appeared on my porch. Guilty. That single word fell like the first raindrop on a roof after months of drought. It didn't thunder, it didn't roar, it just settled, quietly but undeniably. And I knew there was no turning back, neither for Avery nor for me. The courtroom didn't erupt in gasps, as we see on TV. It simply breathed differently. And for the first time in 3 years, so did I. The judge thanked the jury, dismissed them, and began to read the sentence. Years in the state correctional facility, with no possibility of parole for the first 15. His voice was firm and methodical, but I felt the weight of each syllable pressing down. Avery didn't flinch. She sat there, hands cuffed in front, eyes fixed on a spot above the judge's head. If I didn't know her better, I'd think she was bored. The bailiff moved to lead her out, but Avery turned her head at the last moment. Our eyes met, and in that instant, there was no court, no jury, no uniformed officers. Just the little girl I'd taught to play baseball staring at the woman who had tried to kill her. Her lips barely moved. This isn't the last chapter. Then she was gone. I thought relief would come, but it didn't. What came was an empty ache. Justice had been done on paper, but nothing on paper could put back the pieces of what had broken between us.
Logan placet a hand on my shoulder as we walked out.
You did what you had to do, Madison. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. I nodded but didn't reply, because a part of me still wondered if I had lost more than I had gained. Weeks later, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee. The trees had lost their leaves, and the first hint of winter was in the air. The swing no longer creaked. I had finally fixed it. I thought of the bottle, the poison, the trial and the long road that had brought me here.
People think revenge ends when the gaffel falls, when the guilty party is LEDAW.
But the truth is, revenge is only the surface. Beneath it lie the years you don't get back, the conversations you'll never have, the family dinners that become empty chairs and cold plates. Justice gave me safety, it didn't give me peace. But as the wind shifted, bringing the smell of wood smoke from a barbecue up the street, something became clear to me. Peace isn't granted, it's built. One quiet afternoon at a time. One decision not to look back at a closed door. I raised my cup to the empty yard. To endings, I said aloud, and to what comes next. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe and click on the next video that appears on your screen, because in it, the story holds a betrayal and a twist like you've never seen before. Producing our stories takes a lot of time and effort. If you like what we do and would like to support us in creating more captivating narratives, please consider donating. Every contribution, no matter how small, helps us greatly to continue. Thank you for your support. Yeah.